Good morning. Welcome back to the Broadcast Retirement Network. I'm Jeff Snyder. This is BRN Weekly for Saturday, April 1st, 2023. Well, it's been another great week of shows with great topics, of course, great guests. We kicked off the week with a discussion around how fiduciary review should now include cybersecurity. Let's take a look.
Well, I think security breaches are going to occur in any industry which uses personally identifiable information, or PII. Things such as names, addresses, phone numbers, social insurance numbers. And the retirement industry isn't an exception. Hackers and criminals are going to exploit any possible way to collect data which can be used to extract or extort financial reward. Most of the providers in the retirement space naturally come in contact with PII. And even if it's not PII, it could be information which is used to extract PII at a later time. So the providers, which include record keepers, third-party administrators, or advisors, can unknowingly be used by criminals to extract money from retirement plan participants, whether it be through a hack of a database or through impersonation. Impersonation is particularly common because without forms of multi-factor identification and with all the social media that's out there and how much people use it, it's quite easy to get enough information on a retirement plan participant and fool an agent at a record keeper's help desk, for example. So providers should really assume it's just a matter of time before they're impacted and just be prepared for that day. The DOL's program is not actually a regulation, but it is a best practices guide, and it is their publication. So it is wise for providers to be aware of it and treat it like a regulation. Historically, the DOL has introduced special exams where they've targeted a special issue like this. A few years ago, they did launch a program focused on cybersecurity, in fact, and some experts tell me that this is going to return in some fashion. A different example of such a program where they put emphasis on missing participants of a retirement plan. And in their audits, they asked about the specific procedures the plans had in place to identify and manage missing participants. Or even in 2013, they published a best practices guide for target date funds, and that has been referenced in their examination. So cybersecurity is going to be treated the same way, in my opinion. The plan fiduciaries have extensive responsibilities. Our own organization has published a full handbook on all the responsibilities that an investment steward has. It's called the Prudent Practices for Investment Stewards. And we list 21 different practices on managing investments with references to all those regulations. So it is an important role, and it can be overwhelming. But this is why often many of these responsibilities are contracted to advisors as co-fiduciaries to plans. But let's face it, even for advisors, the fiduciary responsibilities require a lot of work and a lot of time and effort. So now along comes the real risk of these cybersecurity breaches, already added to a plate of the risks they had. And it's possible that attention to these vulnerabilities can be overlooked. So there are many hours. There's only so many hours in a day, and providers are attending to the immediate needs of their clients and their demands. So ultimately, I think more staff and or outsourcing is going to be required to handle those. Whether you're the plan fiduciary itself. Or the advisor, I think the most important thing is that you really do have to be aware of the prevailing practices. So if you're the plan sponsor, for example, you need to know to ask questions about it and what questions to ask. And frankly, the US DOL's best practice guide is fantastic resource to do that. From an advisory perspective, again, I don't think you have to be an expert, but again, be aware. Some advisory firms, depending on their size, have their own experts on staff, which would be great. Not all firms have that expertise in-house, but external experts in the form of IT firms and IT services firms, they would have the expertise naturally. So it really is incumbent on the advisor to make sure that that expertise is accessible one way or another. So ignorance is absolutely not an option.
And we also discussed how colorectal cancer rates are on the rise, especially among the young. Let's take a look.
Yeah, so I work for an organization called Fight Colorectal Cancer, and we definitely see a big uptick. And we're not sure what that is yet. We're working on that data. We're working on opportunities to fund research to understand why. But we definitely see in the 45 and under age that colorectal cancer is definitely on the rise. And by 2030, it's projected to be the leading cause of cancer death between the demographic age 20 to 49. So we really have to take action and make change, or we're going to see that continue to get worse. It totally was. I was in complete full health. I ran every day. I hiked mountains. I was super active as a mom of 4 adult sons. And one day I had a really bad pain in my shoulder, and I ended up in the ER. And from that pain in my shoulder, we started to investigate. I was really fortunate that I had a doctor that was really thorough in looking for what was going on. And we found tumors on my liver, and subsequent tests verified that it was actually differentiated pain. That was pain from my liver that was, coming up into my shoulders. And I was diagnosed that Sunday with stage 4 colorectal cancer. Looking back, I think there were maybe symptoms that I was not recognizing. And I think a lot of times that's what we do. We push them off to stress and things like that, raising a family, being busy. And I think that when we have the opportunity, sometimes we are misdiagnosed too. So that's a little bit about where I was and how I was diagnosed. Yeah, mine was a little unusual. I didn't notice symptoms until my liver was so full of tumors that every time I took a breath, my diaphragm and my liver were, hitting, and it was causing the pain. Traditional symptoms are oftentimes things like blood in your stool, abdominal cramping, problems eating, problems digesting. So those are really important things that if you see something like that as a symptom, you want to seek out medical intervention immediately. I was 42 when I was diagnosed, so I didn't fit in any of those spaces to have screening or to have a colonoscopy. That starts at age 45. So for me, I was a little unique with my symptoms and how it related to, to the diagnosis. However, you are 50, so you should have already had your colonoscopy.
I did. I can, for this audience's benefit, I've had it. It was an experience.
Yes, but the good news is that colonoscopy is way better than having cancer. I can promise you that. But bottom line is, I think that that early diagnosis space that we were speaking of earlier, that 45 marker where, we want to have colonoscopies, right? So there's this space for information that we don't understand, why people are getting diagnosed early and we're not sure what to do. So we've made space for, for testing that can occur at an earlier age. If you have a family member that's diagnosed at an early age, a first generation family member, you get to go back 10 years from that diagnosis. But there are so many exceptions. For example, my son, he had the same genetic hereditary marker that I have. And so he was 19 years old when he had his first colonoscopy, and he had 3 precancerous polyps at age 19. Wow. So, going back to that 10-year look back, he would have been 32 and he would have had stage 4 cancer at that point. So I think there's a lot of opportunity there to do some work into making sure that we do appropriate screening. We go to our physician and ask those important questions. And then we follow up with the appropriate screening, whether that's Cologuard, a fit test, whether that's colonoscopy, whatever that looks like. Those are important conversations that we need to have with our physicians. Yeah, I mean, I certainly was scared. I think anyone that's human has a fear of the formidable future of what that looks like, right? I think as a cancer patient, we see mortality differently. I think all of us as humans, it's kind of over there, but when we get diagnosed with something that could take our lives rather rapidly, that mortality idea becomes, right present in the everyday world. And I had an amazing community who loved me and supported me, but I didn't have people that understood ornately, what I was doing and what this experience looked like. And I was fortunate because I didn't want anybody to know how I was, like how it really felt to be me. But that was something that was really hard for me to grip. That my community loved me and they wanted to do whatever they could to help me. But that space for community still was not present that I needed. Looking back, I honestly can tell you I was really fortunate to, be in Ohio and know and understand that I had the Cleveland Clinic right next door. So I was really fortunate in that respect. Looking back, I didn't have any clue what to do. And you feel like you're on an island and you just really don't know. And that's a hard part of this, is because we really need to advocate for ourselves, right? And we just kind of get pushed into these spaces and we don't know what we're doing. And information is coming at us so rapidly that it's hard to know what the right thing is. So I always advocate for, like just your gut feelings, your gut instincts are what you need to go by. And then advocating for yourself, as far as treatment goes, don't ever, I want to encourage everyone to never feel like, they have to choose what their physician is telling them to do. This is our opportunity to be able to choose. Our physicians are there to guide us, but ultimately this is our life and we get to make those decisions. And it's okay to seek out 1 or 2 or 3 or 100 different opinions on what there is as far as treatment goes. I was lucky. I was at the Cleveland Clinic and they were doing novel research. They were trying new techniques to save stage 4 patients. I had a liver transplant. I happenstanced into that whole situation. But looking back, I would definitely say the first thing is you have to know that this is your life you're fighting for. And so you have to advocate for yourself. If you don't feel comfortable, then seek out another opinion or seek out spaces that can help you figure out what those choices are and guide you through it.
Well, we're halfway through a look at our best segments for the week. When we come back, we'll take a look at the other half. You're going to want to stay tuned right here on BRN Weekly. Imagine a new television network that will make you richer, healthier, and in control of your financial future. This network is for the policewoman in Nashville, Tennessee, the baker in Dubuque, Iowa, the teacher in Lexington, Kentucky. We want to make the idea of savings and retirement culturally relevant. But what do you see as a defining issue of the midterms? Especially for the smaller businesses. I mean, they are the lifeblood of the American economy. Featuring exclusive interviews, current affairs, and docuseries. 33 years old, you retired early.
The philosophy is money only matters if it helps you live a life that you love.
But you got to start thinking about retirement as soon as you get in.
The Broadcast Retirement Network will drive very high engagement with premium partnerships. So this isn't retirement and savings for your parents or grandparents. This is for all Americans. And we're going to change the way you think about money. Welcome to the next frontier of retirement and savings. This is BRN, the Broadcast Retirement Network. I'm Jeffrey Snyder, and this is your BRN Retirement Update. 401k fees continue to decline due to market forces and litigation, but as one expert told me, there's still a lot of work to be done.
And what we're finding in the large area is most of the plans have done a good job and have gotten their fees down very low. So it's we're talking less than maybe 5% of these really big plans that litigation, I think, is warranted. We saw a lot of this, a recent spurt of this litigation against BlackRock funds, which I thought was really, really stupid, because those are such low fee index funds, and the courts have correctly knocked those out. Have not taken those forward. Now, I don't agree with all the court decisions. Sometimes I think that we should be allowed more discovery in some of these cases. But as we get smaller, under $1 billion to $500 million, I can still find, but that's still, I'm looking in the top 20%. 80% of the cases are still, 80% of the plans are still have lowered their fees enough that they're doing a fairly good job. As we get smaller, under 200 million, it's a higher percentage. But then at that point, the attorneys aren't as interested because, again, they make all their money as a percentage. So even if you have, relatively high fees in a smaller plan, they don't make as much money, so they're not as interested.
Though 401k fees continue to decline, it's important to remain vigilant as a fiduciary and also as a consumer. With your retirement update, I'm Jeffrey Snyder with the Broadcast Retirement Network.
Are you stuck with a low credit score? A credit report and score that's causing you to be denied credit or pay higher interest rates than others for the same things? Then do what Terrence did and call Credit Repaired for your free credit evaluation to help restore your credit.
I started thinking about buying a new house, and my score wasn't where I needed it to be. I called and spoke with one of the representatives, and we just had a good conversation, and I liked what he was saying.
Just one call for his free credit evaluation was all it took to start back on the track to repairing his credit.
I'm seeing the deletions and I'm getting the report, so I know something's being done. It does make a difference to me.
All it takes is one call to get started.
Credit Repair has given me a second chance to have a better credit score.
Don't let a low credit score hold you back another day. Do what Terrence did and make the call for your free credit evaluation.
Call 800-819-4152. That's 800-819-4152. Again, 800-819-4152.
Welcome back. This week, we also discussed how the SEC's swing pricing proposal doesn't bode well for retail or retirement investors. Let's take a look.
The swing pricing aspect of the SEC's proposal would fundamentally change how mutual funds are priced. Today, a mutual fund's price is at its net asset value, NAV, which represents the market value of all its assets, less its liabilities. The SEC proposal, however, would force all mutual funds, so think about stock, bond, and even target date mutual funds, to adjust their NAV by a swing factor. How a fund's NAV would swing on any day depends upon which direction the fund's net flows went on that day. If a fund has net redemptions, even if it was only just a single dollar, it would always adjust its NAV down by this swing factor. When a fund had net inflows that exceeded 2% of its assets, it would adjust its NAV up by the swing factor. But today's funds don't have complete information on their daily flows by the time they start the pricing process to know whether they should swing the NAV or in which direction. So the SEC included a 4 p.m. hard close in the proposal. Well, the SEC claims that swing pricing will address something called dilution. And this is the idea that redeeming shareholders impose costs on those remaining in the fund, since the fund may have to sell assets to cash out the redemptions. But, if you know a mutual fund, this is the nature of a collective investment pool. Everyone enters and exits at some point. Furthermore, the actual amount of dilution, which ICI estimated, is on average just a few basis points per year. far too small to incentivize investors to redeem. And also, I think more importantly, it's barely a blip when you compare it to the long-term returns that investors have enjoyed in their mutual funds. Well, the SEC claims that swing pricing will address dilution. And this is the idea that redeeming shareholders impose costs on those that remain in the fund, since the fund may have to sell assets to cash out the redemptions. But if you know mutual funds, this is the nature of a collective investment pool. Everyone enters and exits at some point. Furthermore, the actual amount of dilution, which ICI estimated, is on average just a few basis points per year. It's far too small to incentivize redemptions, and it's barely a blip in comparison to the long-term returns that investors in mutual funds have received. The proposal swing pricing and hard close aspects would be really costly, extremely costly to implement, and incredibly disruptive to shareholders. ICI is very concerned that the more than 100 million American investors who use mutual funds to meet their financial goals, such as saving for retirement, a down payment on a home, or their children's education, will be adversely impacted by this proposal. These people are mostly everyday middle-class families who value the professional management and diversified exposure to stock and bond market returns that mutual funds afford them.
So Shelley mentioned the hard close, and a large majority of participants investing in their 401ks for retirement invest through intermediary platforms. And it essentially, with the hard close, essentially it turns 130 million American savers into second-class investors and favors institutional Wall Street investors over Main Street investors. Second, it makes everyday retirement plan transactions such as purchases, loans, required minimum distributions extremely difficult, if not impossible, to execute. It will undermine the open investment architecture system developed over the last 30, 40 years, potentially leaving retirement investors with fewer choices in their retirement program. And finally, ultimately what it does, Jeff, is it erodes retirement savers' confidence in the system, since transparent, timely pricing will not be widely available.
Well, absolutely. There is so much agreement that this proposal is just a bad idea. Based on the comment letters that have been filed with the SEC, it's clear that opposition to mandatory swing pricing and the hard close is nearly universal. Commenters are clear that the supposed solution is extreme, overbroad, and costly, and would more than outweigh any of the supposed benefits. Groups, that are opposing this part of the proposal include, among many others, ICI, Spark, Chamber of Commerce, Consumer Federation of America, and Better Markets. Also, opposition from Congress has been bipartisan, with Representatives Ann Wagner and Brad Sherman also writing to Chair Gensler expressing their concerns about how this proposal would affect millions of American working families.
Well, as Shelley mentioned, there's been a lot of organizations that have submitted letters. Spark has taken this issue to Capitol Hill, and as Shelley points out, got a warm reception from both sides of the aisle in Capitol Hill, which is, again, a testament to how detrimental this will be. Because again, ultimately what it does is it's bad for the individual investor, and therefore it erodes their confidence in the retirement system. So we're keeping the focus up here with episodes like this to get the message out. But across the board, there has been widespread disagreement with this proposal.
And finally, over half of the world's population is expected to be overweight or obese by 2035? Let's take a look.
It is rather disturbing indeed. If you know the data, you realise they're based on reasonably conservative estimates of what is happening. If things don't change and if the ongoing trajectories keep on going, particularly in some of the large middle-income countries, then we will see more and more people in this world with overweight and obesity over the next decade or less. Of course, the issue isn't just a high-income country issue. It's become far more an issue of people living in middle-income countries. Think of the very large countries such as China, India, Indonesia, Pakistan, Brazil, and so on. These countries have growing numbers of people living with overweight and obesity, and I might add also with type 2 diabetes, which is related in part to the same health, the same causes. And it's this issue, it's not the high-income countries progressively getting more and more people with obesity. It's actually these middle-income countries in particular that are seeing the growth of this issue. And that's related to many, many changes in food systems, urbanisation, the way in which the physical activity environments in those countries have changed so dramatically over the past decade or two, and there doesn't look like it's going to be changing dramatically for the better in the next decade or two either, and that's the concern we have. We have seen in many of the middle-income countries this change over the last few years from traditional food culture and food sources to far more of a Western, in inverted commas, diet, more fast food, more of the high sugar beverages that are actually marketed in a major way. We've seen the rise of food marketing directed towards children, young people and adults, and real changes in the food environment there. But we've also seen other aspects of urbanisation, more people in cars or on motorised transport, fewer people walking on streets, fewer people in bicycles, different ways in which people live their life now than a decade or two ago. And that's happened reasonably rapidly in many of these fast developing economies. And there are consequences of that. There are things that have happened to the good, but there are also things that have happened that have not been healthful or helpful for people.
Yeah.
And we see this in children as well as in adults and adolescents. I don't think that there's been some sort of worldwide epidemic of slothfulness that has emerged on all of us over the last few years. Instead, we have responded just naturally to the rather pathological environment that has emerged. Now, there are good and bad things about technology. It's wonderful that we can access people, we can connect to people wherever we are. But that does mean we spend more time on screens. It does mean that many of our work, our everyday activity is now on screens and in sedentary pursuits. Contrast that to a few decades ago. Think about children. Children then used to have to walk to see their mates. They'd meet in the park because it was fairly safe. There weren't as many cars going to and from the schools. They hung around. People walked to the railway station or the bus stop to get to work. Fewer people drove cars because there were fewer cars. So the normal activity didn't. The work that you did, more people were in more, not just manual labour, but in labour in work that actually required walking and doing things. Now we've got labour-saving devices. We just sit to do our work. There are fewer people doing that sort of heavy manual work. And so more and more, about a lot of our activity, and we lost active transport. We all stopped walking distances, or even maybe we walked to a closer bus stop and we got into cars and we sat in order to commute. So a very different world from a few decades ago. And that was for children and it was also for adults. And then we watched our green space go as we got more and more motorways and places like that. And then parents got concerned about their children walking to and from school because they were worried that they'd be run over by the parents driving their cars to school. So they put kids into the cars in order to drive them to school. And on it went. Our world became much more difficult to be just unconsciously active. And now, so it isn't that we're playing less sport, it's that our active transport and our incidental physical activity has really decreased. And that's to do with urban planning, our urban environments, and the changed way in which we move around. And we've also seen changes in our food environments.
And that wraps up this episode of BRN Weekly. Have a topic of interest, someone you think we should talk to, drop us a line. And don't forget, for all the latest curated news all in one place in lifestyle, finance, tech, so much more, check out today's edition of our daily newsletter, The Morning Pulse. Want to search our archives, check out our latest content? Well, visit our website and, of course, all of our streaming partners. We're back again tomorrow for another edition of BRN Sunday. We'll have members of the media, academia, financial services, and government standing by as we analyze all the news and events for the week. You're not going to want to miss it. Until then, I'm Jeff Snyder. Stay safe, keep on saving, and don't forget, roll with the changes. Now is your opportunity to co-create content around any topic on the first lifestyle and wellness network. Reach a global audience through our platform and co-own exclusive branded content. All of our programs are available on demand and also as audio-only podcasts, so you can take us on the go. Broadcast Retirement Network, available anytime, anywhere, and on any device.
Tax audits, tax liens, wage garnishments.
Every day we hear stories like this about good folks who are simply struggling to pay their bills. Each of them are living a frightening IRS tax nightmare, and they are afraid it will destroy their lives.
I'm a divorced single mom, and my ex-husband left me and the kids with a lot of unpaid bills, including unpaid taxes. I was really starting to show my stress on my kids because the IRS had sent me a letter demanding a huge payment from me. I couldn't afford it. So then the IRS was threatening to garnish my wages. I'm already living paycheck to paycheck. That would have put me over the edge financially.
It truly seemed hopeless, but then a friend at work told her to call the tax relief line.
The people at the tax relief line, they told me about something called innocent spouse relief. They worked it out so that all of the taxes from my ex are not my problem. I don't know how that works, and I don't care. All I care about is that I don't owe the IRS a dime, and they are not going to take my paycheck.
Even if it seems hopeless, you should call the number on your screen right now. There is absolutely no cost for the call or the consultation. You are under no obligation. If you are worried that the IRS could garnish your wages, seize your assets, even take your home, call us right now. The Tax Relief Line is here to help you. Now you have a knowledgeable, professional team of tax experts that are ready to negotiate with the IRS and fight for you to save you money. The Tax Relief Line's professionals have successfully negotiated thousands of cases, reducing and sometimes even eliminating the tax debt for their clients. It's very easy to get started. Simply call the number on your screen right now. You don't have to live in fear anymore. The call and the consultation are free.